On today's episode of Locked On Stars, we do a full breakdown and profile on the newest Dallas Star, Colin Blackwell.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Joey Erickson, forward producer of 105 Through the Fan. Please be sure to subscribe. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for making us a part of your day and making us your first listen. Happy Friday, Stars fans. Yes, you have made it to the weekend, and I'm here to send you off on a high note as we get to know the newest Dallas Star, Colin Blackwell, a bit better. He has a very interesting story, and his hockey career is actually quite remarkable. So I want to share some of that with you today. And I think he's going to turn a lot of heads this season in Dallas. And I will share why on today's episode. Shout out to all you everydayers out there that join me on Locked On Stars to talk Stars hockey 24/7. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, your family, anybody. Let them know we're talking Texas hockey every single day. Hit that notification bell, subscribe, drop a like, and drop a comment below as well. Always a pleasure to be with you. So let's jump into today's profile and breakdown of Colin Blackwell, the Radek Faksa replacement this season. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So I want to share a bit of a background with you on Colin Blackwell. First off, he is a right shot. He's a center. He can play wing from North Andover, Massachusetts, 31 years of age, 5'9", 190 pounds. He was drafted by the San Jose Sharks in the 7th round, 194th overall in 2011. And that really is just the start of his journey through amateur and professional hockey. He decided to go to Harvard University. He played all 4 years there, and he dealt with some injuries during his time in Harvard. Picked up 19 points, which was a career high his senior year in 28 games, and a very versatile forward. Did not have quite the offensive numbers he would have liked, but was a steady 4-year starter at Harvard. And he dealt with a lot of injuries, which kind of derailed some of his development, but he got a chance to play in the AHL for 3 seasons, which included the Barracuda, the Rochester Americans, and Milwaukee Admirals before he got a chance in the National Hockey League with the Nashville Predators. He played 27 games in 1920, and he picked up 10 assists, 3 goals, and 7 assists, and he really established himself as sort of a bottom 6 player within the National Hockey League, which is very, very valuable and sort of what we will expect out of Colin Blackwell at this point in his career. But what is really fascinating about him is his time in New York. After his 2-year contract was done in Nashville, he went to the Rangers during the COVID season 2021, and he ended up playing in 47 games and turned a lot of heads in New York, became a fan favorite, and his versatility was a huge advantage for him. Not only was he playing on the 4th line every once in a while, he ended up playing quite a bit alongside Artemi Panarin and put up his best offensive numbers of his career. His career highs till this day were with New York back in 2020-21. In 47 games, he had 12 goals, 10 assists, and 22 points. He picked up 15 penalty minutes as well. But he could play a 4th line checking role or be bumped up into the lineup and play alongside Panarin, which of course helped out his offensive numbers. And that's why I don't want to gloss over the fact too much with Blackwell that he's going to exclusively be on the 4th line this season with Dallas. Obviously, the Stars have a ton of depth. It's going to be really hard for Blackwell to crack that top 6. But as we see throughout the season, especially early on, maybe the Stars are having chemistry issues with a few lines. I don't foresee that because everybody's been around the block here the past few seasons. Your top line will probably consist of Rope, Robo, and Johnston. Then you have Bork along with Stankov and with Jamie Benn. So it'll be really hard for Blackwell to crack the top 6, but he could really be a player like Sam Steele from a year ago. I think he has that potential and that sort of impact here in Dallas next season because of his ability to just kind of plug and play anywhere. And when you put him alongside really good players, I think he will thrive. But you're going to mainly find him in a bottom six role here in Dallas next season. He went to Seattle during their inaugural season, ended up having 17 points in 39 games before being traded over to Toronto. And had a pretty good year to finish out with the Maple Leafs. And then, of course, he was with the Chicago Blackhawks the past 2 seasons. You have to take some of his numbers in Chicago with a grain of salt. So he got injured at the end of his first season. He played 53 games in his first season, had a sports hernia, injury that ended his year, and that forced him to get a late start in 23-24, but still had pretty modest numbers. 8 goals, 4 assists for 12 points in 44 games with the Blackhawks last season. He is not going to be asked to play as much as he did with Chicago last season. He averaged 14 and a half minutes per game. He's not going to get those type of minutes here in Dallas with the crowded forward room. He will probably live somewhere between 11.5 and 12 minutes, somewhere around where we saw Craig Smith for the majority of the season. But this is a player that has thrived in his career on exceeding expectations. And Dallas has signed him to a 1-year contract for $775,000. And these numbers do not jump off the page, but I would not be surprised if Blackwell puts up 12 to 15 goals next season. That may be a bit bullish, but he has thrived on exceeding expectations his whole career. He's never been that guy, but he's found a way to establish himself as a nice depth forward within the National Hockey League. And he's put up some very, very decent numbers along the way. And in 44 games this past season, he played a little bit with Connor Bedard and ended up putting some really nice offensive numbers. When you compare him and Radek Faksa, because that is the replacement at this point in time to some degree, along with Ty Dellandrea, this is the Stars' replacement to their fourth line center. One thing Blackwell is not bringing over is his experience or at least success on the dots. In Chicago last year, he's 45% in the dot. He had years just over 50% a few times in his career, so he will not bring that sort of stability in the faceoff dot. The last 4 seasons, Radek Faksa was well above 50%, and that's why he took a lot of draws, especially on the penalty kill. Blackwell played about 80 minutes on the PK for Chicago a season ago, so he'll get some opportunities to be on special teams this season as well for Dallas. He actually does have a connection with Lyubushkin. He played alongside Lyubushkin in Toronto. They actually connected for a goal in a series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But Blackwell, I think, is going to turn a lot of heads, and I think could potentially be what Sam Steele was last season. You play him alongside some nice players, and having Dadanov and Steele more than likely surrounding him, that gives him some extra speed, and he can do what he does best. He can create offensive looks. He can create chances if you give him a chance to play with some more talented players. But if you need him in that fourth line checking role, he can be gritty. He can be physical. And you can get a lot out of him because he's not flashy, but he has a high end motor. I really encourage you to take a look at just some of his highlights and just some of his games. He works his butt off. He goes to the dirty areas, works hard on the boards, but he has to me, has a tad bit more offensive upside than Faksa. It's weird to say because Faksa has better offensive numbers over the past few years, but I think Blackwell has more skill, just a skosh more speed as well at this point in his career. and I think can have a very, very interesting season here in Dallas. So do not look over Colin Blackwell. A very, very interesting career, starting at Harvard, had to buy his dues in the AHL, and look. In the American Hockey League in Rochester one season, he had 45 points. So there is some offensive skill there. He went from a bottom six forward in the AHL to playing top 6 minutes at one point in time with New York and alongside Artemi Panarin, which of course is going to make you a lot better. But that is the type of potential he has. You're going to see him in much more of an exclusive bottom six role here in Dallas, but don't overlook him just quite yet. He had some nice stretches of offensive production in Chicago. So I think just bringing him here in Dallas is a lot better environment for him to thrive in. He was a -2 this past season. He was -16 the year prior, but Chicago was a complete mess, obviously. So you can take some of those numbers with a grain of salt. Dallas is obviously better built than Chicago is at this point in time. I think you're going to get an elevated Blackwell who exceeds expectations. That is what he has done in his career. It's what he's done since he was 20 years old, and he just got a crack at being a NHL everyday guy not too long ago, and he'll be out to prove it here in a one-year deal. So do not overlook Colin Blackwell. It's all I'm trying to tell you on today's episode of Locked On Stars. He is replacing Radek Faksa, who of course was traded to the St. Louis Blues about a week ago. So let's compare the two. What are we missing and what are we getting in Colin Blackwell into next season? I'll tell you that in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, it's kind of like the Dallas Stars. You have a little bit of everything. eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. That's what we're hoping with Colin Blackwell this next season. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, Stars fans, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So Radek Faksa was traded to the St. Louis Blues for future cash considerations, which opened up some more cap space for the Dallas Stars to eventually re-sign Harley. By the way, it would be a great day to re-sign Harley. We're still waiting for that confirmation, which is hopefully right around the corner. But at this point in time, the great thing about getting Radek Faksa off the books was Colin Blackwell gives you what Faksa does now at a third of the price. Faksa at 3.25 did not give you enough production in a fourth line role, at least at that number. Blackwell, I think, can give you that. Plus, I truly believe a skosh more at a third of the price. And that's what makes Blackwell a really, really intriguing piece. And I'm really excited for him to join this lineup and to watch him get in the mix this past season. So let's just compare some of the advanced numbers between Faksa and Blackwell from last season. And these are at 5-on-5. And Faksa played 30 more games, by the way, than Blackwell, since he was out with an injury at the beginning of the season. So Corsi for percentage kind of tells the story of who has the puck on their stick, getting shots on net, creating chances. Faksa has an advantage there, 55, and Blackwell at 48. But Blackwell's going to be playing with better talent, and he's going to be in a better environment to increase his numbers, and why I think he's going to have a really, really surprising year and turn a lot of heads. So he was on the ice for 13 goals the past season, or he's on the ice for 17 goals against Blackwell. Radek Faksa was 34 at 5-on-5. You look at the expected goals for. Blackwell was at 19 and Radek Faksa 28.54. Expected goals against. Blackwell's a bit lower at 21.7 and Faksa was at 25.02. Faksa, more importantly, and I think what Dallas took into consideration when moving on from Faksa, especially this past season, was he was completely inept during the postseason. The game was just too fast at this point in time for Faksa. For what he brings to the table, which is a guy that's good on the dots, he can PK for you, and he can just wear down defenses as a fourth liner. You just weren't getting that out of Faksa because the game was moving at too high a rate. Blackwell has a bit more of pace to his game, and I think was a big reason why Radek Faksa was moved to St. Louis. They just needed somebody that has a little more speed in their game, because Faksa at 3.25 does no good for you if he's going to be healthy scratch in the postseason. Faksa had 7 goals and 12 assists this past season in 74 games. And as I mentioned earlier, Blackwell had 12 points in 44 games. Actually, some really, really good offensive numbers since joining the Blackhawks about midway through the season. You look at high danger chances for. So Blackwell had 80 in 44 games, 130 for Faksa in 74. So Blackwell has an edge on that if you span it over 82 games. He creates chances, ladies and gentlemen. He played a lot in his defensive zone. You look at his defensive zone starts, he had 95 the majority of his shifts. So he was put out there in more of a defensive role to win draws. But I think you're going to see Steele take a lot of the faceoffs and maybe play center a bit more this next season rather than wing, to give Dallas some speed up the middle. Pete DeBoer started to show that a little later on in the season, because it gave him a bit more versatility on the fourth line and just a bit more speed down the middle rather than Faksa, obviously, and Delandry was thrown into that role a bit as well. This fourth line in general for Dallas, which we think is going to be Steele, Dadanov, and Blackwell, is intriguing because it's not necessarily your fourth line checking line. It's going to have a bit more pop in it, but they obviously can be effective in a checking role. At least Steele and Blackwell will. Dadanov, I think, is the real wild card for next season. I just don't know where he necessarily fits in the best. And he played really, really well in the postseason this past year. And Dadanov could play anywhere. DeBoer obviously trusts him and can kind of put him wherever he needs. If some young guys get off to slow starts like Stankoven and Bork, Dadanov will be a great veteran that you can kind of play alongside Ben and Johnston, possibly, if you need to break up that top line. I'm not necessarily married to the idea of Johnston playing up with Robertson and Hintz for a couple of reasons. Stankov and Johnston Ben were incredible. I'm curious to see what Pete DeBoer uses next season up front, because there are just a million options, obviously, and you feel it makes sense that you put Johnston up on that top line, but I don't know if it's just that easy of a decision, because maybe Stankoven should play on that top line with Hintz and Robertson. Stankoven's a bit more of a playmaker, and I know Johnston is as well, but Stankoven, I think, could really help Robertson in terms of finding soft spots and getting his looks. And I know this is a tangent here in the conversation. We're talking about Colin Blackwell here, but I could see Blackwell finding a spot with Sagan and Marchment at some point in time, right? Depending on injuries, or Sagan and Duchesne. Like, who knows? Because I think Marchment can really, really thrive in a fourth line role as well. There are just so many options. But for the sake of the conversation, you're pretty much replacing Blackwell for Radek Faksa. So the numbers are pretty similar. The nice thing about Blackwell is it just comes at a much, much cheaper cost, and you don't miss out on someone that can play special teams. He played on the power play in New York. He was on the second unit, so that's always an option. No way he's going to be on the second unit here in Dallas. But look, if the power play continues to stink like we saw for stretches of last season, and I'm exaggerating a bit, they were top 10 at the end of the regular season, but we saw in the postseason, sometimes you need to shake it up a bit and throw some guys out there. So you're going to get a guy that can play the penalty kill. You are losing some on the dot, but it's not much of a worry when you have guys like Steele that can take draws. You have 80 different centers within the Dallas Stars that can take faceoffs. So you're going to be fine in that department. Dallas has been more than capable in the dots for years now. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see the mix with Blackwell in the conversation, because Dadanov, I think, is truly the wild card, because he doesn't necessarily scream fourth line checker, but Dallas is really, really crowded up front. And that's not necessarily a bad thing either. If you can get production from Dadanov in your bottom six, that is more than enough, at least from what we saw from the Stars offense last season. They didn't have any trouble scoring in the regular season. It was as the playoffs wore along and bodies got tired physically, mentally, the offense really, really started to dry up. So, as always, and what has kind of been the theme throughout the offseason, I'm not worried about the forwards up front. Dallas is bringing back a lot of key players that did the majority of the scoring, minus Pavelski, but Bork and Stankoven should make up for that easily. And I think Blackwell, seriously, don't be surprised if he chips in 12 to 15 goals this next season. I think he thrives in this type of environment. Let's talk a bit more about our expectations for Blackwell and company in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is obsessed with finding you ways to save money on tickets. It's also the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer it gets to first pitch. I was in New York this past weekend. I went to a Mets game. I went ahead and fired up the Game Time app. You can download it. It takes 30 seconds on your smartphone. It's free. It's available on the App Store or the Google Play Store. I went to Citi Field and I got tickets immediately, just a couple hours before the game. And then boom, I'm walking through the gates of Citi Field, enjoying a beautiful afternoon ball game with the New York Mets. And the great thing about Game Time as well, you can see the view from your seats before you buy it, so you know what you're getting. You don't have to worry about obstructions. You don't have to worry about a railing in front of you. That can happen if you're going to a new arena or new ballpark you don't know about. Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Plus, it's covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. They will credit you 110% of the difference as well. So find the great tickets you need on Game Time. And it doesn't just have to be baseball. It can be any sport. It can be hockey. It can be football, comedy, theater, you name it, they have it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL. Yes, LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app right now. Terms apply again. Create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. Colin Blackwell, the 31-year-old right shot center iceman, joining the Dallas Stars this season. Blackwell signed a one-year deal for $775,000, and at 31 years of age, I really think this could be a great value for the Stars. And I'm going to say it again: do not be surprised if he puts up 12 to 15 goals this next season. I really, really like his game. I encourage you to go watch him on YouTube a bit. He plays a nice, grindy, sort of Radek Faksa game, but with some more speed. And I think a lot of skill. He scored this really, really beautiful goal against the Flyers last season, coming down the right wing, beautiful toe drag into the slot, and then beat the netminder. I think that tells you the capability of Blackwell and where he fits in here in Dallas, because he's not going to be asked to play 14 minutes a game like he did last season in Chicago. And there were some injuries that forced that. He was not going to play that initially, but he played alongside Bedard, which helped some of his numbers. It's his 7th year in the NHL. He's still sort of finding his groove and establishing himself as an everyday player. And yes, he's going to be used in a more exclusive bottom 6 role here in Dallas, but don't forget about the top 6 upside. And he does have the capability to play with some more talented players and hold his own. We have seen that in his career. We haven't seen it the last few years, but he was playing it in Chicago. Those teams weren't competing for anything. When he was playing in New York, even Seattle, some decent years. And when he went to Toronto, he was a nice piece to the conversation at the trade deadline there. He can hold himself. He can hold his own with really, really good players and offenses. And when he was in New York, that had a lot of forwards, a lot of young guys that were trying to make a name for themselves. It's going to be sort of the same thing here in Dallas. And obviously, he's not going to have the pressure here to be that guy. It's not what they're bringing him in for. And I think he can really, really thrive in an environment that preaches really strong defense and just being hard to play against. He also is not afraid to mix it up. He's physical. He throws huge checks. You can see him hammer McKinnon in his first game back from injury this past season, like not afraid to go after guys, mix it up. He can fight. He brings a little grit. And it's kind of a symbol of his entire career battling through injuries to get to this point. And he's carved out a very, very nice career for himself. I think he's going to be the Sam Steele of last season. Fans are going to quickly be like, yeah, all right, I like this kid. I like this guy. Good player. And he's going to be a pretty nice piece for years to come. The fourth line in general, you're probably going to see a lot of moving parts too. Matej Blumel might get a chance. Oscar Bach is another one that had a very, very good season down in the AHL. We could see another rotation like we sort of saw for the first 3 months of last season, where it was Dellandrea, Smith, and Faksa, and Steele really kind of all got rotated out. Steele not as much since he played 77 games, but Dellandrea, Smith, and Faksa kind of changed the pace a bit. So Blackwell will certainly get his rest, and he'll have some nights off. If DeBoer wants to get a new face in there, get some more pace maybe with Blumel, get more scoring touch with Blumel or Bach. The construction of the 12 forwards is pretty solid. Really, really solid. So the Stars are going to have the luxury of having 13 guys, 12 guys that are NHL ready, 13 to some degree. I think Blumel and Bach can more than handle themselves coming in to play on the fourth line as well. So really, really excited for Colin Blackwell to join the mix. And he wasn't a big name. This is sort of a Craig Smith signing. May have been something we kind of glossed over, but I did a bit deeper dive on him and research about his career, and yeah, it kind of fired me up about him. So I wanted to share some of that enthusiasm with you Stars fans on today's episode of Locked On Stars. So that wraps up a profile on the newest Dallas Star, Colin Blackwell. And that'll do it for this week on Locked On Stars. Enjoy your weekend, Stars fans. Be sure to show some love to some other Locked On podcast shows as well. Locked On Mavs, Rangers, and Cowboys. Show some love to those shows as well. Be sure to hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below, and please share this podcast wherever you can. Let your friends know, let your family, let everybody and the entire world know we're talking Stars hockey every single day. I love hearing your comments, letting me know you're glad you found this podcast because it's a daily podcast, and that's exactly what we're here for. We're all diehard Stars fans that want to have conversations about the Dallas Stars every single day. Because frankly, there is a lot to talk about. Not necessarily right now. It's a bit of a dry spell in the National Hockey League. But I promise you the next month or so, we're going to be ramping back up. And preseason will be here before you know it. Enjoy the rest of your day. As always, a pleasure to be with you. Enjoy your weekend. See you Monday. So long, Stars fans.